A starving bear approaches a cabin. What the family finds in its mouth will leave you speechless. The Johnson family, living in a secluded cabin deep in the woods, woke to a quiet winter morning, surrounded by falling snow. The usual stillness of their remote life was disrupted when John heard a strange noise outside. Stepping cautiously out into the cold, he was startled to see a large, gaunt bear stumbling toward their cabin, clearly weak and starving. Its movements were slow and disoriented, and its fur was thin and matted. John, concerned for his family's safety, watched the bear closely, unsure of its intentions as it neared their cabin. The bear, weak and starving, continued to approach the cabin, its movements slow and uncoordinated. Its fur was thin, and its ribs were visible beneath the tattered coat. John, feeling a mix of concern and caution, motioned for his family to stay inside. The bear seemed driven by desperation rather than aggression, moving closer to the cabin as if seeking something. John, unsure of what the bear wanted but sensing its vulnerability, remained on edge, unsure of how to handle the situation as the bear neared their doorstep. As Sarah peered out the frosted window, she noticed something peculiar about the bear. It wasn't behaving aggressively or scavenging for food. It seemed focused, almost purposeful. "What if it's starving?" she whispered, her voice laced with fear and pity. John stayed silent, watching as the bear stumbled closer to the cabin. His instincts told him to stay vigilant, but something about the bear's actions seemed odd. Then Sarah saw it. Clutched gently in the bear's mouth was a small bundle wrapped in fur. It didn't look like prey. It wasn't torn or bloodied. The bear approached the cabin carefully, almost hesitantly. When it reached a few feet from the door, it dropped the bundle onto the snow-covered ground, then stepped back, glancing at the cabin as though waiting. "What is it carrying?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. John squinted through the storm, his pulse quickening. Whatever was in the bundle wasn't moving, but something about it felt off. He didn't yet realize the profound significance of what the bear had delivered. Hesitant but unable to ignore the strange delivery, John grabbed his coat and carefully stepped outside. The biting cold stung his face as he approached the bundle in the snow. Sarah followed, holding Emma and Ben close, her breath visible in the freezing air. As John crouched down to examine the object, his heart skipped a beat. It wasn't an animal or anything he could have imagined. Wrapped tightly in animal fur was a baby, a tiny, fragile infant, pale and barely breathing. "Is that a baby?" Sarah gasped, her voice breaking with shock and disbelief. John gently touched the child's cold face, confirming it was alive, though weak. Without hesitation, he scooped the baby up, shielding it from the cold and rushing back to the cabin. Inside, they wrapped the baby in warm blankets, their minds racing with questions. How had the infant ended up in the wilderness, and why had the bear, of all creatures, brought it to their doorstep? Inside the warmth of the cabin, the Johnson family worked frantically to save the fragile infant. Sarah held the child close, wrapping it in blankets while John checked for injuries. The baby's breathing was faint, its tiny body cold to the touch, but it was alive. As the bear disappeared into the woods, leaving no signs of aggression or harm, the family was left with an overwhelming sense of responsibility. "We have to help," Sarah said, her voice trembling but resolute. John nodded. There was no time for debate. They needed to act quickly to save the child's life. They stoked the fire higher, ensuring the cabin stayed warm, and worked together to bring the baby back to strength. But questions lingered. How had this infant survived the harsh wilderness? And why had the bear chosen to deliver it to them? The family's efforts paid off as the baby's breathing grew stronger and its pale skin began to regain warmth. Sarah gently cradled the infant, tears streaming down her face as relief washed over her. Emma and Ben watched in quiet wonder, sensing the gravity of the moment even in their young minds. Hours later, John managed to contact local authorities, who arrived at the cabin despite the treacherous snowstorm. After examining the baby and listening to the family's account, the authorities began piecing together the mystery. The baby, they discovered, had survived a car accident in the nearby woods. The parents had perished, and the infant was presumed lost to the wilderness until the bear found it. The officers, stunned by the bear's actions, struggled to comprehend the miraculous chain of events. The Johnson family, however, was focused on one thing: the fragile life they had been entrusted to protect. Against all odds, the baby was alive, a testament to resilience and the unexpected kindness of nature. In the days following the miraculous rescue, the family noticed something remarkable. The bear began returning to the edge of the forest. It stayed at a distance, its gaunt form visible through the trees, watching the cabin silently. At first, John was cautious, unsure of the bear's intentions, but the animal showed no aggression, only a quiet presence, as if ensuring the baby it had delivered was safe. The family's fear gradually turned into awe. Despite its own desperate hunger, the bear had chosen to act with a care and intelligence that defied understanding. The visits became a routine. The bear would linger briefly, watching the cabin, before disappearing back into the woods. It was as though it had taken on the role of a silent guardian, ensuring the safety of the life it had saved. As time passed, the bear's visits became a comforting presence for the Johnson family. Though it remained at the edge of the woods, its quiet watchfulness felt more like guardianship than a threat. Emma and Ben, once afraid, grew curious and began to see the bear as a protector rather than a danger. They would occasionally wave from the cabin window, and the bear, though it never approached, seemed to acknowledge their gestures with calm patience. John and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the bear understood more than it should. It wasn't driven by hunger or instinct alone. It seemed connected to the baby it had saved. The family began to feel a bond with the creature, unspoken yet profound. It was as if the bear had become part of their story, a bridge between the wild and the human, united by a shared act of kindness and compassion. Lily's arrival in the Johnson family marked the beginning of a profound journey of hope, resilience, and connection. From the moment the starving bear had dropped the infant at their doorstep, the family's lives were forever changed. The initial days were a whirlwind of uncertainty and effort. Sarah and John took turns holding and nurturing the baby, keeping her warm and feeding her carefully. Emma and Ben, though young, sensed the gravity of the situation and stayed quiet, watching their parents pour all their energy into ensuring Lily's survival. Each breath the baby took felt like a small miracle. Her tiny body, once cold and fragile, began to gain warmth and strength under the family's care. Despite the harsh conditions outside, the cabin became a sanctuary of life and love. News of the bear's incredible act spread quickly. The local authorities, initially skeptical, were astonished by the family's account and the evidence before them. Wildlife experts and journalists came to the cabin, fascinated by the story of the bear that defied nature's harshness to deliver a child to safety. For the Johnsons, however, the focus was always on Lily. As the days turned into weeks, she became a part of their family. Her laughter filled the cabin, her bright eyes a reminder of the miraculous event that had brought her to them. But the bear was never far from their minds. Its visits to the edge of the woods continued, a silent presence that felt both protective and mysterious. John often found himself looking out the window, wondering what had driven the creature to act with such compassion. Sarah believed the bear had a purpose beyond survival, a depth of understanding that humans rarely attributed to wild animals. "It's like it knew Lily needed us," she would say, her voice filled with wonder. The children, too, saw the bear as something extraordinary. Ben began drawing pictures of it, his young imagination painting it as a guardian spirit of the forest. Emma would often tell stories about the bear to anyone who visited, describing it as a hero who saved their sister's life. Over time, Lily's bond with the wilderness deepened. Even as a baby, she seemed soothed by the sounds of the forest, her tiny fingers reaching out toward the trees whenever Sarah held her by the window. It was as if the wild had left an indelible mark on her soul. The family's connection to the bear grew stronger with each passing day. Though they never dared approach it, they felt a mutual respect, a bond forged in the most extraordinary circumstances. The bear never showed aggression, only calm, watchful presence, as though ensuring the family and Lily were safe. As Lily grew older, she began asking questions about the bear that had saved her. John and Sarah would recount the story with reverence, emphasizing the kindness and bravery of the creature that had delivered her to their door. "It must have seen something special in you," Sarah would tell her, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "You're here because it believed you deserved a chance to live." The bear eventually stopped visiting, its presence fading into the memory of those winter days. But its legacy endured. The Johnsons often found themselves looking out at the forest, feeling the quiet reassurance that their lives had been touched by something extraordinary.